Welcome back. Hope you all enjoyed your lunch. Any problems or issues I need to know about during lunch? No? All right. State, you may call your next witness.
Leigh Meininger. Meininger. Good afternoon, sir. Can you tell us your name and spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
Yes, my name is Leigh Meininger, Leigh Meininger.
What do you do for a living?
I am an attorney specializing in bankruptcy law, and I'm also a bankruptcy trustee.
And what does a bankruptcy trustee do?
Basically, we liquidate Chapter 7 assets that aren't exempt to pay creditors.
All right. And so let me see if I can help everybody understand what a bankruptcy trustee does. When somebody who owns a business, if the owner or owners files for, is it Chapter 11 first, reorganization?
Yes, that's reorganization bankruptcy.
Right. If it goes beyond that to what you were calling liquidation, is that called Chapter 7?
That is called Chapter 7.
At that point, does somebody appoint a trustee?
Yes, there's a panel of Chapter 7 trustees that are randomly assigned cases.
And does a bankruptcy court judge make that appointment?
No, the United States trustee does.
Okay. All right. And so, in effect, do you actually kind of take over as the custodian of that corporation so that you can try and pay back debtors?
That's exactly correct, yes.
All right. How long have you been involved with bankruptcy law and working as a trustee?
29 years.
Now, back in 2009, did you get appointed as a trustee for a bankruptcy involving Land Resource LLC?
Yes, I did.
What does LLC mean?
Limited liability company.
And briefly, what is a limited liability company?
It's a corporation like any other, except rather than have shareholders, they have what's called members, and they run the company just like the shareholders would.
And do you recall how the ownership of Land Resource LLC was divided up?
Well, there were 36 separate corporations that were converted. They eventually owned by Mr. Ward and the trust for 2 of his daughters.
And you recall the percentage of distribution?
I do not. However, Mr. Ward was the major percentage.
Okay. And when did Land Resource LLC and all the subsidiary corporations go into Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy?
It was in 2009. I'm not sure the exact date, but they were in Chapter 7 in 2008. It converted,
okay,
I think a little less than a year later.
Now, without going into specifics, unless I specifically ask, is there a way as the trustee of this bankruptcy to go back and examine disbursements and distributions made by that corporation, or in this instance, corporations, in the last 4 years?
Yes.
And in order to be able to do so, how do you go about talking to witnesses to gather that information?
Well, there's several ways. First, get the books and records and actually look at runs of disbursements and copies of disbursements. And then, perform examinations of interested parties, including Mr. Ward and principals, so on.
Okay. Now, back in September of 2009, were Mrs. and Mr. Ward set for what these examinations are called, I believe, 2004 examinations?
That's correct. They're called 2004 because they fall under Bankruptcy Rule 2004.
And did you play a role in when those would be set?
No, counsel Broad & Cassell basically set that up.
And during these 2004 examinations, is there any sort of limit or scope as to the nature of questions that can be asked of people?
No, it's much broader than a normal subpoena would be, a deposition pursuant to a subpoena. Basically, you can ask any relevant question.
And who can ask the questions of the person under examination?
Our attorneys would.
Okay. And
Hold on,
I'm sorry?
Go ahead. Thanks.
all right. And would you be there to participate in these 2004 examinations as well?
In those, I was not scheduled to participate, no.
Okay. And are you familiar with a term called tenancy by the entireties?
I am.
What does that basically mean?
Tenancy by the entireties is a form of ownership which requires certain elements, the major one being a married couple.
And correct me if I'm wrong, is it wrong to say that it's kind of like a corporation between a man and a woman? That separate marriage corporation has property separate and apart from the man and the woman, or nowadays man, woman, woman?
Yes, that's exactly. I often describe it as it's basically the husband and the husband or husband-wife are individuals, but then the tenants by the entireties is a separate person for ownership purposes.
And so, potentially, as the trustee of this bankruptcy, could you begin an adversary bankruptcy proceeding against Mr. Ward?
Yes,
Could you begin an adversary proceeding against Mrs. Ward?
we could, but we didn't.
And is that because of her passing?
Yes, that's correct. When we filed the adversary proceedings against Mr. Ward and a large number of other people, she had passed by then.
All right. But going back to that, back to the tying this into the tenancy by the entireties, if somebody, as the trustee of a bankruptcy or as a plaintiff in another kind of civil lawsuit, were to get a judgment against both Mr. and Mrs. Ward, would that in turn be a judgment against their tenancy by entireties?
Yes, it would be.
And if Mr. Ward were to own any property separate from the tenancy by the entireties, would that be his property?
Yes, it would be.
If Mrs. Ward were to own any property separate from the marital property, the tenancy by the entireties, would that in turn be her property?
Yes, it would be.
So potentially there could be his, hers, and quote unquote our property.
That's correct.
Okay. And are you familiar with a company called Bond Safeguard Insurance Company?
I am.
Was that one of the creditors to the indebted corporations that went into bankruptcy?
Yes, they're a creditor in virtually all of them.
All right. And did they, and are you aware as the trustee of this bankruptcy, did they separately file suit against Mr. and Mrs. Ward apart from this bankruptcy?
They did.
And was that done on September 1st of 2009 or about then?
About then, I don't remember the exact date.
And was the suit against both Mr. and Mrs. Ward?
I don't know.
Okay. And I take it the trustee's position was you need to stop that and get in line with the rest of the creditors.
As a matter of fact, we filed a lawsuit against Bond Safeguard to determine that exact issue.
Okay.
And to stop them from going after the assets that we felt that we had the right to go after in the bankruptcy.
Okay. Now, let me turn to AK for identification, and may I please approach the witness?
You may.
Sir, I'm showing you AK for identification. I'm going to ask you if you recognize that document. It's just a yes or no for now.
Yes.
What do you recognize it as without telling us the contents?
It was an email from Mr. Ward to myself and 3 others.
Is this a true and accurate copy? Obviously, it's a hard copy from an electronic message you received.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move AK for identification into evidence.
All right, this will be received without objection as State's Exhibit Number 7.
Okay, and is that document, State 7, the time that it says it's sent from, is that accurate? Does that reflect when your electronic device said you received that electronic message?
Yes.
Okay. And is the content of the subject header, is that consistent with the email you read when you received it on an electronic device?
I don't have anything on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got permission to publish and then I didn't even do it.
Okay. I'm sorry, would you repeat the
Hold
question?
on, the jury screens have not come on. All right, they are on now. Go ahead.
All right, so let's try that again. Is the sent time frame, is that consistent with what your electronic device said about
Yes.
when you received it? I assume you were not awake at that time.
No, I didn't see this until the next morning.
Okay. And the subject line, "You bastards," is that accurate?
It is.
And is the content of the message, "I hope you are happy. Diane killed herself this evening. Go to hell." Is that accurate from the electronic message you received?
It is.
And are you familiar with the other names that were on the to header of that email?
Yes.
And who is David Landis?
Mr. Landis is an attorney, and I'm not sure he represented, I believe he represented Mr. Ward in some capacity.
Okay. And Elizabeth Green would have been another attorney that either represented Mr. or Mrs. Ward?
She is a bankruptcy attorney. She was representing Mr. Ward.
And then there, of course, was you, and then is Roy Cobert. Who is that person?
Roy Corbett is with the firm that was hired, Broad & Cassell, as our attorney. He was the lead attorney at that time.
No other questions of this witness?
Cross.
Good afternoon, Mr. Meininger. My name is Bill Cromwell. We haven't met before except in the elevator going to lunch.
Yes, we did.
I just have a few questions for you. I believe you testified in direct that as the bankruptcy trustee, your job is to determine the ownership of assets, correct?
Yes, amongst other things.
And then after you look at the owners, and then you actually look at the assets to determine if they're exempt or non-exempt. Is that true?
Yes, but in a corporation, there is no exemptions.
I'm going to get to exempt. Now, Diane Ward, she was not an owner of Land Resources, correct?
No, I don't believe she was.
And you discussed on direct that in September of 2009, she was set for a 2004 examination.
Yes, she was.
Now, you didn't personally set that the time for that deposition, is that
No,
correct?
Mr. Colbert did.
And yeah, Mr. Colbert, he said it. There was no subpoena for her to appear for this deposition, true?
No, and in 2004, you don't use a subpoena.
And there was no court order for this deposition, correct?
Yes, there's a court order permitting the trustee to perform a 2004 exam against specific people.
But there was no court order ordering Mrs. Ward or Mr. Ward to come to the deposition on that day, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I believe we've got the attorneys kind of straightened out as far who was on the email. We have Elizabeth Green was the attorney representing Mr. Ward. Is that?
Yes, a bankruptcy attorney, yes.
And then David Landis, who's also on the email, he was representing Diane Ward.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Now, there was a conversation about moving this deposition. Do you recall the conversation? This was when Friday, the 18th of September, about moving the deposition, which had been set for the following Thursday, the 24th. Do you recall the discussion about that?
The only information I have on that is what I was told by Mr. Colbert.
Okay. And do you recall Mr. Colbert discussing with you about they wanted to move, there was a call, they wanted to move the deposition because they hadn't gotten all the documents together. Do you recall that?
I recall him discussing having that conversation, yes.
And direct, you talked about when Mr. J was asking about procedures, leading up to a 2004 examination. You talked about what you first do is to get the documents. That's, get the books and records. So that's sort of like first, if you have an order, first let's get the books and records. Is that true?
Usually you do, yes.
Yeah. And then after you get the books and records, you look at those, and then you have the examination, generally. Is that true?
Generally, yes.
And the reason for that is it makes common sense. If you want to have a complete examination, you want to have the books and records first, so you have something to talk about with the witness. True?
Yes.
And in this case, and I know you discussed having a discussion with Mr. Colbert, but recall that one of the reasons was that they wanted to move it was that they couldn't get all the documents together to Mr. Colbert. Is that? Do you recall that part of the discussion?
Yeah, I remember him mentioning that they wanted to delay because the documents were incomplete.
Yeah, and it makes common sense. They wanted to move the, what, they wanted to move the actual examination to the time when they could get the.
For about 15 years was on September the 21st,
Yes, that's correct.
2009, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so nothing before. Now, let's make sure that we understand. When you're speaking with her on the phone, you're not using Skype. In other words, you're not
No.
calling on a computer where you're looking at her face and she's looking at yours and y'all are talking back and forth.
Just on the phone. There was
So-
no visual.
So you're speaking with her on the phone. You can't see what her eyes, if her eyes are glassy or watery, you can't see any of that, can you?
No.
All you can know is the tone of voice that she is giving to you on the call on September the 21st after 15 years. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Now, when she indicated that she was going to go and have another glass of wine, did you ask her how many glasses of wine that she had?
No.
What you're telling us, though, is that listening to her, you could not tell how much alcohol she may have consumed prior to or during the conversation with you, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you wouldn't know whether she was over the legal limit, for example, to drive a car, would you?
No.
Based upon her tone of voice to you, did you think that she was impaired where she couldn't drive a car?
No, not at all.
So you thought she could drive a car?
Yes, she spoke very clearly.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect.
None, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You're free to go. Call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The state will call Michael Mandarano. I do.
You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, good afternoon.
How you doing?
Good. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
My name is Mike Mandarano, Michael Mandarano, and I'm currently a corporal with the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
Now, back in 2009, were you also employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
Yes,
All right. And how long had you been employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
in 2000, I started in December of 2006, so it would have been about 3 years.
Now, during that time, on September 21st of 2009, what area of patrol were you assigned to?
I was assigned to what's called our Sector 3, which is the Pine Hills area of Orlando. They break it up into sectors. It's just a geographic area to spread manpower.
Now, on September 21st, 2009, did you respond to a call for service around 7:45 that evening?
Yes,
All right. And where was that call for service?
it was in the Islesworth subdivision off of Conroy Road.
All right. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb. Islesworth is probably not in Pine Hills. How come you responded to that location?
I was actually on dinner break at the time. I was eating at a Jersey Mike's down the street on Conroy Road. And like I said, we were on break, but the call came out, and due to the nature of the call and our proximity to it, myself and the other people I was eating with decided to respond.
All right. And who were you eating with?
Deputy Corey Legg, Deputy Ray Bagley. I believe that's it.
All right. Now, were you in standard Orange County Sheriff's uniform?
Yes, sir. I was dressed in uniform.
All right. Similar to what the court deputies are wearing here today?
Yes, sir.
And driving a patrol car?
Yes, sir. Marked patrol car.
All right. So marked patrol car, lights, agency insignia on it and everything?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you respond to a call like this, what type of call did you receive, actually?
It was a call. So we get it through our dispatch. It comes over our radio. And it was an aggravated battery via gunshot. And we got information that the person calling it in had said he had shot his wife. So it's a code 3 call. It's just it's a call we can turn our lights and sirens on. We can, safely disobey traffic laws, all that stuff. So it would be a call that we would respond to in emergency mode.
All right. And did all three of you respond to the Islesworth community?
Yes, sir.
And when you got to the Islesworth community, did you have any issues coming through the gate?
No, sir. We told the guard gate that we were there for an emergency call, and they let us in.
Now, when you came through the gate, did you have any difficulties locating the property?
Because I worked in Pine Hills, I wasn't overly familiar with Windermere or Islesworth, so I was trying to pull it up on a map. Deputy Legg was more familiar with it, so at one point he had went around me and drove down the main road, and I followed behind him as we attempted to locate the address.
Did you guys end up overshooting the target location?
By a little bit, not by much.
All right. Now, that call for service that you get out that allows you to kind of code 3, kind of disobey the traffic laws, all the fun stuff of being a cop, does that cause you some concern when you actually have to arrive on a scene like that?
Yes, because when you're going to a call that's in progress, which is usually what happens when it's a violent felony or any type of in-progress crime, the lights and sirens could alert the suspect to your arrival and could make it a safety issue for you once you do show up.
Now, when you exit your patrol car, do you take out your agency-issued firearm?
Yeah, once we determined we were at the correct location, we actually saw an individual standing near the driveway. We got out, and because of the nature of the call, it was a shooting, and the suspect was supposedly calling it in. We did take out our firearms, and we took a position of cover so that if we were shot at, we would be able to return fire and do what we needed to do from a safe location.
Now, did you issue commands to the individual that was at the end of this driveway?
Yes. So I saw a white male standing near the end of his driveway. He had two things in his hand. One looked like a phone. It was lit up to his head. I couldn't tell what the other object was. So from where I was standing, I started to yell at him to get down on the ground, to drop what he had on his hand, and to listen to our commands.
Did he have some difficulty complying with you at first?
Yeah, initially I would tell him to turn away from us, and he would face us. And then I would tell him to lay down on the ground, and he would do it. And I would say, you know, put your hands behind your back. He would stand up and walk back towards the house. It's almost like he was doing the opposite of what I was saying. He wasn't being aggressive or verbally. He wasn't being rude, or he was being compliant, but he was just having difficulty following my instructions.
Now, was anyone shouting different instructions than what you were issuing?
Deputy Legg was near me behind the tree. We were probably both yelling things in the heat of the moment, trying to get the situation under control. But nobody would have been yelling the opposite. And for the most part, I remember being the main person yelling.
Now, were you the one that actually approached the defendant?
Yeah, once we were able to get the items out of his hand and we determined that we could see his hands, Deputy Legg covered me, and I went in and got him on the ground and ended up securing him in handcuffs.
Now, the person that you handcuffed, do you see him in the courtroom here today?
Yes, yes I do.
He's doing the courtesy of standing up for you. Is that the individual who stood up? Is that the person
Yes.
that you handcuffed at the end of the driveway in Ellsworth?
Yes, sir.
All right, and that's located here in Orange County, Florida?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you were handcuffing him and taking him into custody, could you smell the impurities of alcohol?
Yes, I did.
And what about his eyes? Did you have an opportunity to look at his eyes?
His eyes were glassy. I did have a very, very brief conversation with him after I handcuffed him. Some of his words were a little bit slurred, but his eyes were glassy and he smelled like alcohol.
Now, when you have him secured, what do you do with him?
At that point, I need to get him away from the front of the house. We're still investigating the shooting crime. And obviously his safety, our safety, we need to move him away from the front of the house. So at that time, we're also trying to find any potential victims or additional suspects. So in the interest of safety, I asked him, is anybody else in the house? He answered that his wife was in the house. I asked, where's your wife? And he said, she's dead. I said, okay, but where is she? And he said, up in the master bedroom. So as I continued to move him away, it was just gathering facts so that I could relay it to additional responding deputies. so that we could be as safe as possible and keep the community safe as well.
Now, was this a normal-sized house?
No, sir.
How would you describe this house?
It was a very large house. It had, I mean, it was probably almost 8,000 square feet. It had like a separate walkover to like a different part of the house with more rooms. It's a very, very large house.
All right, and with it being such a large house, does it take more deputies than normal to conduct what's known as a protective sweep of the residence?
Yes, sir.
All right, and were you able to eventually do a protective sweep of the residence?
Yeah, once we got enough deputies that we felt we could safely do the protective sweep, we did conduct it.
Now, did you have an opportunity to see the victim in this case?
Yes.
All right. Can you tell the jury where you located her?
She was upstairs. You kind of had to walk up the stairs and around to, I guess, what would be the master bedroom. From the master bedroom door, you could partially see her body. It was sticking out from behind like an architectural wall that curved around. She was laying on her left side, like, and her left arm was out, and the back of her head was kind of facing the entry to the master, if that makes sense.
Was it obvious to you that she was deceased?
Yeah, as we got closer, she didn't respond to any commands, and we could tell she was deceased.
Now, did you touch her at all?
I did not.
Did any other deputies touch her at all?
I don't know.
Now, when you leave that bedroom, did you go outside on the back patio?
Eventually, yes, we made our way to the back patio.
Just a moment. Your Honor, permission to republish a portion of State's 6 has already been entered into evidence.
Granted.
Now,
Hold on, it's not up for the jury yet. There it is. Go ahead.
it's up. All right, thank you. Now, Deputy Mandarano, if you're looking at State's 6 here in evidence, it's photographed. The last digits are 356. There's an individual with shorts on and a shirt. Do you recognize the back of that individual?
Yes, that was him the night of the incident.
Okay, him being the defendant here today,
Yes, sir.
and the defendant is James Ward, the individual who stood up earlier.
Yes.
All right, now, did you have an opportunity to get a good look at that stain on the back of the shirt?
When I saw it, it was right after I'd handcuffed him and was moving him to a safer location. It was pretty dark out there. I'd noticed it. I initially thought it was blood, and then I'd given him his glasses back later after we had cleared the house, and he had his back to me in the car, and that's when I had seen that it was probably wine or some kind of food-colored or colored liquid drink.
All right, and the colored liquid drink or possibly wine, did you see that spilled out elsewhere in the house somewhere?
Yes, when we had made our way out to the back patio, there was a broken glass of wine, and there was spilled wine.
Now, you said you gave the defendant his glasses back. Did you give him his phone back, though?
No, I didn't touch his phone.
Where did his phone remain?
He had put it down in the driveway, if I remember correctly, and was still holding the other object, which at the time didn't know what it was. He had eventually put that down. That's when I handcuffed him. When I had gone up to him, that's when I realized it was glasses. And he had asked for his glasses back, said he couldn't see, so I got him off the ground and put him on his face.
Thank you. Just one moment. Nothing further.
Cross.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Craig Gillen. I don't believe that we've met.
No, sir.
Just have a few questions for you. You indicated that you responded after, I guess you were having, you said lunch, but it's fairly late for lunch, I guess.
Yeah,
Late
when-
lunch?
Yeah, when you if it would be
Gotcha.
my second meal, so I called it lunch.
It's your second meal. You call it lunch. It's
Yes, sir.
7:45 or 7:50.
Yes.
You guys take off and you're going down there, and you're going down there because the guy had called it in. In other words, that Mr. Ward had called in and asked for the police to come to his home, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so were there 2 cars or 3 cars, police cars, that went to the scene?
There would have been 3.
Okay. There were 3?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so when you get there, Mr. Ward's out screaming, "Hey, guys, I'm over here." He's kind of waving you in, isn't he?
Yes, he does get our attention.
Okay. So you're trying to find out where the house is, either on GPS or whatever, but he's over kind of flagging you in and trying to get you to come to the house where he had called it in, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you indicated when you got out that, you know, your job and the job of the other deputies were to sort of secure, to make sure that there wasn't any kind of potential threat. So you take the precautions necessary and you all get out and do your job, right?
Yes.
Now, so more than one of you is kind of giving instructions to Mr. Ward at that time, correct?
I believe me and Corey Legg were saying instructions at one point, yes.
Oh, so two of you are giving instructions. You feel as though maybe you were giving either more instructions or the loudest instructions. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you indicated that while these two instructions were coming on, that Mr. Ward, you may say lie down, he was sort of backing up a little bit or whatever seemed to be the instructions. He seemed to be a bit confused by it, correct?
Can you repeat the question?
Whatever instructions he was getting from you and Mr. Legg, he was a little bit, almost disoriented, non-responsive because he's getting two instructions from two different people, right?
He was having a hard time following the instructions, yes.
Right. Well, either your instructions or Mr. Legg's instructions, he's got two people coming at him telling him what to do, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But in any event, down he goes, and then you go over and then you handcuff him, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you were aware that this was called in by Mr. Ward regarding a death, correct? Or a shooting at the house where someone had, so were you aware of that?
Yes, we were told by our dispatcher that there was a shooting.
Okay. Now, so you indicated that he had kind of a smell a little bit of alcohol, right?
Yes, sir.
And maybe a little bit glassy in watery in his eyes?
Yes.
All right. Now, tell the jury what you did to test him for alcohol there. I'm sure you gave him a breathalyzer or did something to find out the level of alcohol that he may have had in him at that time.
No. I didn't do anything to test his alcohol level.
Did you have in your patrol car tests or breathalyzers where if you wanted to, you could have done that?
No.
So you did not have any breathalyzers in the car?
No.
All right. Do you know whether there was breathalyzers in the other two cars that were there?
There wouldn't have been. They're assigned to DUI units.
When he is down there, in order to preserve whatever evidence might be on his hands, did you bag his hands so that there might be a preservation of whatever might be on his hands?
No.
And do you know what I mean when I use the phrase bagging hands?
I would assume putting plastic bags over somebody's hands.
You sounded like you're asking me a question. My question is, do you know what it means when the phrase says to bag a hand or bag hands?
That's never been a part of any type of policy we've been taught or any type of investigation that I've ever been a part of.
Okay, so you've never been in a situation where there's an investigation of a shooting and the victim or someone else might have their hands bagged in order to make sure that whatever evidence is on the hands would be preserved?
I've never seen that.
Okay, what we do know is you didn't do that.
Correct.
Okay. Now you indicated that he had his glasses in his hands, right?
Yes, sir.
And you indicated that he had a phone, a BlackBerry phone, is that?
I believe it was a BlackBerry, yes.
Okay. And was that what he was using to coordinate with the 911 call to coordinate the arrival of you gentlemen?
It would be a guess if I answered that. I think so.
All right. When he got down on the ground, what, if anything, did you do with the phone?
He put the phone down on the driveway during one of his couple of trips back and forth. like I said, was still holding what turned out to be glasses in his left hand. Once he put the phone down, he moved far enough away from it that when I put him in handcuffs, I moved him away from the area that was still dangerous and left the phone where it was.
So you didn't touch the phone, correct?
Correct.
Because you, may I assume you didn't touch the phone because you believed it to be potential evidence in the case, and you didn't want to take it into evidence at that time. Is that right?
Right.
So you leave the phone there for someone else to come and get and put it into evidence, correct?
Correct.
Now, with the glasses, that's a little bit different because he indicated to you that he couldn't see without his glasses,
Yes, sir.
and that's when you gave his glasses back to him, correct?
Correct.
Now, you indicated you saw some dark features on the back of his shirt. You know, you don't know whether it's wine or some juice, or you don't know what it is, do you?
No.
Okay. And so, and you didn't do any investigation on his shirt, I assume, to
No, sir.
determine what it was. Your job was to get him safely in a position away from the house, and that would have, I assume, been in one of the cars?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then that's when you decide that it's time to go inside yourself, correct?
Yeah, with a group of people once we've secured the
Now,
scene.
were you the first individual in to the master bedroom where Mrs. Ward was?
I don't remember.
So the first group that went in, that would have been you and Mr. Legg and who else?
I don't remember if Deputy Legg went inside. I don't know if he had something else he was doing outside. I know I went inside. There was a sergeant. I think Greg Rickman went inside. I don't know if he was a corporal or sergeant at the time, but there was a Doug Cornwell that went inside. There was a handful of people that showed up after the fact that we assembled a team based on the size of the house that we felt we could safely maneuver that went inside.
Who was in charge on the scene of the law enforcement group?
It would have been myself, Deputy Legg, and Deputy Bagley until some of the sergeants showed up, and then they took over command of tactical operations, if that's what you're asking.
So who took over command from you? Who was the next person that showed up to take command of the scene?
I don't remember exactly. All those people that I just lifted off had rank at the time. They were corporals or sergeants. I don't remember who showed up first.
Okay. But whoever outranked you, or someone who outranked you, then took over the scene, and you were excused from your duties in terms of being in charge of the scene.
Correct.
Now, when you went out, you said you went out in the patio, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you didn't see anything on the patio. You didn't see any turned over furniture, did you?
I don't think so.
You didn't see any turned over tables or turned over chairs, did you?
No.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect.
No, Deputy Mandarano, do you arrest people for being drunk at their own home?
No, sir.
All right, and when you have a shooting investigation like this, is testing the sobriety of an individual in their driveway the goal of your response?
No, sir.
Nothing further, Your Honor. This witness, we have no further need for this witness.
Defense, Ms. Witness be excused.
We did not object to him being excused, Your Honor.
Thank you. Corporal, you're free to go. Call your next witness.
Kevin Stinger.
Fire.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you tell us your name?
Kevin Stinger.
And where do you currently work?
I work for the Capital One Financial Corporation.
So is that what's in your wallet?
That is
All right. And so how long have you worked there?
approximately 5 years.
Where did you work before that?
The Orange County Sheriff's Office.
What did you do for the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
In my last assignment before I retired, I was the Sergeant of Computer Crimes.
And as the Sergeant of Computer Crimes, did that also involve examining digital devices for non-computer crimes?
That is correct.
How long were you involved with doing that for the Orange County Sheriff?
I was one of the two individuals who created the Computer Crimes Squad, and I believe we did it for at least 10 years since we created the unit.
And what was your educational background or professional training and experience that allows you, at the time of 2009 or early 2010, whenever you got these devices, to examine digital devices such as back then BlackBerries and cell phones?
I have a graduate certificate and a master's degree in digital forensics from the University of Central Florida. I'm a certified computer forensics examiner through the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists. I hold several different information and computer forensics certifications from several different agencies. I'm trying to remember the rest of it. I helped to create the digital forensics program at the University of Central Florida, and I did computer forensics for both the Sheriff's Office as well as state, local, and federal agencies across Central Florida.
All right, now, were you given devices to examine in part of the investigation of the death of Diane Ward?
I did.
May I approach the witness with V and X?
You may. Did you say V as in Victor?
V is in Victor, X is in X-ray.
Thank you.
I'll first give you V, and I'll ask you whether or not you recognize V.
I do.
What do you recognize V as?
Package containing a black cell phone from this particular case.
All right. Now, you didn't go out to the house and collect it yourself, did you?
I did not.
How is it that a phone gets to you?
Evidence is frequently collected on the scene by our CSIs, and then will be brought to the Sheriff's Office and checked in, and then we will later on examine it.
And when you go to check it out and check it into your evidence, is it labeled and packaged like it is here?
It is.
Is it sealed when you get it?
Yes.
When you're done examining it, do you reseal it?
Yes, I do.
Do you see anywhere some old evidence tape with
Yes.
Kevin Stinger's initials on it anywhere?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to ask you about X for identification. Same questions. Do you recognize X for identification from anywhere?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize it as a device from this case as well?
I do.
And is the case number and information labeled on these packages?
It is.
And when you got it, was it sealed up? And when you were done with it, did you seal it back up?
I did.
So let me ask you about V for identification first. It's said to be a black cell phone. Did you use any particular software tool or tools to examine the contents of V for identification?
I would have examined it with both a tool that's called the Cellbrite and another set, it's a software application called Parabon Device Seizure.
And what was your familiarity at the time when you examined these devices with those two software tools?
I had used them on a large number of other cases, downloading cell phones to pull evidence off them.
Now, when you say you download a cell phone, walk us through what you're talking about. You get this device out of evidence, you open up the bag, what do you do?
You have to power on the cell phone, connect it with any number of different connection devices. There are many different types of connectors for cell phones, particularly several years ago, before they became more standard. You would then connect it directly to either a computer or to the Cellbrite device itself. And then you would begin the process to extract the information from the phone And then once that information was extracted, you could then do searches on the extracted information for like keywords or sort it for messages and then print those out.
What sorts of areas of data can you get off of a device back in 2009, like these devices?
It was complete, and it remains today completely dependent on the make and the model of the cell phone as to what you can get out of that cell phone. Some you could get text messages, some you could get emails, some you can get pictures, some you could get music, some you could get the internal settings, some you could get all of the above. It is completely dependent on the make and the model.
All right, and so with those two different tools you described, did you also examine X with those tools, which is a device said to be a BlackBerry?
Yes,
Were you able to extract information from these devices?
I did.
Were you able to prepare reports with these software tools that organize the information that you collect from these devices?
I did.
Now, forgive me if you mentioned it, but do you do something to like airplane mode them or put them in a magic box where they can't have connections with radio towers when you're doing this?
You always try to put them in airplane mode, which keeps it from making a connection to the network whenever possible.
May I approach the witness again?
You may.
All right, so we're back with V and X. So let's talk about V first. Do you recognize what has been marked for identification purposes as Alpha Victor, AV?
I do.
What do you recognize it as?
This is a report from the Paraben device seizure application. It is a call log.
Portion of a call log?
That is correct.
And you pulled that out with the Paraben
That is
software tool? Okay. And is that pulled from V or from X?
I would actually have to go in and take a look at the ESN numbers
All right.
on the phone to tell that.
I thought we were going to go there. Madam Clerk, may I have scissors? Thank you. Now, what bunch of initials did you just say, and what do they mean?
The electronic serial number for the phone.
You don't work with many BlackBerries these days?
No more Blackberries.
Now, is this number behind the battery?
It is behind the battery.
Okay.
I am not going to be able to read that.
All right. Which one are you looking for? Oh, geez. ESN hex?
Yes.
Perhaps 80E8 09009? Something close?
Probably be the other device.
Okay. I'll try. I'm getting there too, though. 80CA50EE. Madam Clerk, have a magnifying glass? Maybe your eyes can see it. Well, anyway, since we more readily identified the other serial number, can I ask you about AW? Does that match the serial number that we just read out?
Yes. 80 Charlie Alpha 50 Echo Echo.
And that goes to the device that was in which envelope?
This envelope right here.
X, okay. So with X, can you tell us what we're looking at as far as AW here?
This, once again, is a paraben device seizure report containing information on text messages which were on the phone.
Or does it contain electronic mail as well?
Electronic text messages or emails,
Okay.
one of the two.
Your Honor, this time,
I could not hear the last answer.
Electronic, it's either text messages or emails, either one.
the state would move AW for identification into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
I didn't hear. Is there any objection?
No, Your Honor, I said no objection.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I
I
should have
didn't
spoken
hear
up.
you. Yeah. This will be received without objection. It states Exhibit number 8.
All right, now going back to, I think the other device was V. Can you read that serial number now that it's on the screen?
Yes. That is 80 Echo Bravo 9989, which is the same that's on this report.
And this report that we refer to as AV, the phone log,
It is.
and that came from V.
That is correct.
All right, Your Honor, at this time, the state would move AV, as in Victor, into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
This will be received without objection. It states Exhibit number 9.
Now, AX for identification may be a little unfair because in a prior proceeding in which you were part of, it was cut some, so there isn't a serial number at the bottom. But can you recognize the content as perhaps being extracted from one of those two devices?
It is a paraben device seizure report that was part of this case.
And so it would be related to V as opposed to X.
I believe so.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move AX into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, this will be received without objection. It states Exhibit number 10.
No other questions of this witness?
Cross.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Craig Gillen. I have a few questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Now, when you went in and did your searches, what were you given any instructions about what to look for?
In the case of these devices, both the hardware Cellbrite and the paraben, the first thing it does is simply dump the information. Once that information has been dumped, you can then go back and check to see if it has keywords or anything like that, or sometimes it's turned back directly over to the detectives.
Now, when you looked at these devices and you were looking for text messages and emails, correct?
I was asked to dump any information that was available from the devices.
So whatever was on the devices, you
That
organized
device-
them, dumped them down, and turned them over to the government?
Anything that was on there that I could extract with either of those two programs, I simply dumped out of the cell phone.
after you dumped them, did you do any organizational searches within the dumped material or the databases that you were looking at?
I can't recall doing any searches myself. I would have simply prepared a report and turned it over to the detectives.
So anything on either one of those two devices that was either a text or an email, you would have dumped down and turned over to the government, correct?
That is correct.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect. This is witness excused. All right, sir, you're free to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who's your next one? All right, call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. State will call William Baxley.
You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
Sure. My name is William R. Bagley, Jr.
And spell your last name for the court reporter?
Sure, it's Bagley.
All right. And even though it's kind of obvious for all of us, where are you employed?
Currently, I'm employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
All right. And when did you first begin working for the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
For the Sheriff's Office, my hire date is 10/6/06.
So back on September 21st of 2009, you were with the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
Yes, sir.
And where were you patrolling that and during that date and time?
I was assigned to Sector 3 Road Patrol, which is West Orange County, Dr. Phillips, Wyndham area.
Now, at around 7:45, 7:50, did you and other deputies that you were out to dinner with receive a call for service?
We did.
All right, and what was that call for service?
That was a high priority Code 3 call, and it was for a shooting.
Now, how did you respond to this Code 3 call?
How did I respond?
Yes.
We left dinner and went to our vehicles, lights and sirens, pretty much down to, it's a gated community, up to the gate.
All right, and then you say up to the gate. Why did you cut your lights and sirens at the gate?
Obviously, if we're running lights and sirens, we draw a lot of attention, so we didn't want to draw any more attention. And also, we were going to have to talk to the guards at the gate, and with the siren in the background, it wouldn't be feasible to have a conversation.
Now, did you enter into Islesworth?
We did.
All right, and what position in the cars were you? First, second, third?
To my recollection, I believe I was the third vehicle.
Now, when you arrived at the residence, what did you do?
The three of us pretty much arrived together, so it might be a convoy, if you will, and exited my vehicle. The other two deputies had exited theirs vehicles and had approached on the right-hand side, and I stayed behind as a cover officer.
Okay, now, when you say you remained behind as a cover officer, what exactly are you doing?
I employed a rifle because of the location. The residences are spread far apart, and the houses are generally larger than average, in my opinion, from my experience. So due to a distance, there's certain times where the tools or weapons we use are more feasible for longer distances. So I provided basically lethal cover, if you will, while the other two deputies approached the residence.
Now, while you were providing cover, were you able to see an individual in the driveway?
At first, no. But eventually, as they approached, the dispatcher, I believe, alerted us that the suspect could see us.
And then were you able to see the individual?
Yes.
Now, as you're providing this cover, did you observe the other deputies giving commands to the defendant?
I could not see them, but I could hear them.
Okay. Okay, so then I'm just a little confused and curious, actually. So how are you providing cover if you can't see them?
Okay, I'm covering the house. Like I said, it's a very large residence that's in there. And to my estimation, since we were still on the street and the house is set back further than the street, almost if it has its own cul-de-sac, I estimated it to be 50 to 75 yards, so which is greater than the distance of this courtroom. They used different methods of concealment to conceal where they were. Obviously, we wouldn't walk directly straight up in a straight line. So I was covering, waiting for somebody to come out of the house while they were approaching in another direction.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're not actually pointing your gun at the defendant while he's talking to the first two deputies?
At the initial approach, I did not see the defendant, and my other deputies were using concealment where people couldn't see them, obviously. So I could hear them, I knew where they were, but if I focused on them, I couldn't focus on the house.
All right, now you could hear them giving the defendant verbal commands.
Correct.
All right, and were they both giving commands or just one?
No, Deputy Mandarano was giving instructions.
All right, and could you observe any difficulties with the defendant complying with those commands?
At that time, I could see the defendant. He did have his hands up, and I do recall Deputy Mandarano telling him to drop what's in his hands, which obviously alerted me because I was so far away that I could see the defendant, but not what's in his hands. So that gave great cause for alarm for me. And then, since only one officer or deputy gives the commands, it would be less confusing for the defendant, but he did not immediately comply, no, sir.
Now, once he was taken to the ground, where was he placed?
I was still in cover once they made contact, once they made the approach, if you will, and then went what we would call hands-on with the suspect or the defendant. I left my position and started advancing towards the house, still looking to see if there were other suspects to come out of the house.
Now, did you have any contact with the individual they took into custody?
Once the defendant was on the ground and had applied the handcuffs to him and were patting him down for everyone's safety, I remember I did ask him a couple questions, so I was within earshot of him.
And what questions did you ask him?
I believe I stated in my report, but I'm just going from the recollection. I would have asked him consistently, is there anybody else in the house? Are you alone? If there's anybody in the house, where they are.
Your Honor, I object. If he remembers what he did, he can say so, but to say I would have asked him,
You object?
I object.
Thanks. Sustain.
Now, did you eventually make entry into the house?
We did.
All right, and when you made entry in the house, where did you go?
From the front door, I went to the right and up the stairway.
And did you eventually spot the victim in a bedroom?
Yes, as we were making approach up the stairway, out of my peripheral vision to the left-hand side, I did observe a hand and then an arm as I went up the steps. So as you could see, if you could imagine, walking up this way, and as you walk up, more and more of the view comes into play, if you will. So I believe at the top of the stair, I was able to see a head right on the arm part and then all the way down to the hand.
And what did you do when you saw somebody laying down, I'm assuming?
Yes, the victim was on the ground.
All right, and what did you do?
Gave verbal commands to the victim. You know, can you hear us? Are you okay? Do you need help? Look for any kind of signs of life so we could immediately go to the victim and render aid.
Any response?
No response.
All right, and when you got a full picture of what you saw initially was a hand, any signs of life?
No, sir.
Now, when you were in the bedroom, did you notice anything on the nightstand right near where the victim in this case was laying?
I did observe what I believe to be a gun holster, black in color, on the nightstand.
All right, and did you collect that holster?
No, I didn't.
All right, and why didn't you collect the holster?
As a road patrol deputy in a crime scene such as that, it's not my job to collect evidence. We have a special unit that does that.
Just one moment. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross?
Good afternoon. Just a few questions. When you arrived, you said that you were sort of in the back with the rifle, providing some cover for your colleagues, correct?
Okay, I was at the back of my vehicle, yes, sir, but if you say the back, you're going to have to specify for me where you're the back you're
You
talking
were
about.
farther away from Mr. Ward than the other two officers, correct?
Initially, yes, sir.
And so, who were the other two officers?
Deputies Legg and Mandarano.
Okay, now, Deputy Mandarano, was he giving commands?
Yes.
And was Deputy Legg giving commands?
I don't recall hearing Deputy Legg speak.
But, so you don't recall that? You don't know whether he was or wasn't?
I can tell you with certainty that Deputy Mandarano gave commands, and it was his voice that I heard. If Deputy Legg gave commands, I didn't hear them.
Oh, I see. All right. Now, you go inside the house. You go up to the room. You see Mrs. Ward on the floor, correct?
I did.
And one of the first things that you see that catches your eye is a black gun holster on the nightstand, correct?
I don't know if I would say it was the first thing that caught my eye, but it's a fairly big room, and I'm scanning the room looking for other suspects or victims, and it happened to stick out. Yes, sir.
It happened to stick out to you, correct?
Sure.
You saw that as an important component of the crime scene, right?
We had the reports that there was a firearm involved and a victim on the ground. I saw a gun holster. Yes.
Thank you.
Redirect. May this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any
Yes,
objection?
Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Deputy. You're free to go. All right, folks, this is a good time to take a break. So we're going to take our afternoon break, 15 minutes. That should give you time to have some coffee and relax a little bit. All right? I'll see you back in 15 minutes. Court's in recess. All right, welcome back. State, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. State will call Quincy Allen.
You may inquire.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Quincy Allen. I work for the Orange County Sheriff's Office. I'm a deputy there, and I'm currently assigned to the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation.
And can you spell your first and last name for the court report?
First name Quincy, Quincy. Last name Allen, Alleyne.
Now, Mr. Allen, back on September 21st of 2009, did you respond to the Islesworth community?
Yes, sir.
And were you one of the initial responding deputies?
Yes, sir.
And what was your role when you arrived on scene?
I took a perimeter spot on scene because I was instructed to do so.
And while maintaining that perimeter spot, were you eventually charged with taking into custody in your patrol car James Ward?
Yes, sir.
And when you placed him in your patrol car, were you in your patrol car with him?
Yes, sir.
And during that time, did you have the opportunity to observe Mr. Ward?
I did.
And how long did you remain on scene, at least the Islesworth location, with Mr. Ward?
I'd say probably an hour and a half.
And then from the Islesworth scene, did you move him to any other locations?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, and where did you take him from that location?
I took him to the Orange County Sheriff's Office Central Operations Center located at John Young in West Colonial.
Now, do you see James Ward in this courtroom here today?
Yes, sir.
Is that the individual that just stood up?
Yeah, that would be Mr. Ward, sir.
Let the record reflect that the witness has identified Mr. Ward. Now, final question. At any point during the hour and a half that you had him in the back of the patrol car and then the 20-something minute commute to operations, did you ever see the defendant cry?
No, sir. We were talking sports, if I remember correctly.
Nothing further.
Your Honor, objection, move to sidebar.
The jury will disregard the last statement made by the witness. Any other questions, Mr. Interlock?
Without getting into what you were discussing, did you ever see him cry?
No, sir.
Well, we have a motion.
Let me see the attorneys at sidebar. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the statement that was made about a sports conversation has been stricken. You are to disregard that statement. It was an inappropriate comment, and the witness should not have made it. Mr. Interlock, any other further questions?
No.
Cross?
None, Your Honor.
All right, may this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You're free to go. Call your next witness. You may. Mr. J, call your next witness. Okay. You may inquire. Have a seat, ma'am.
Thank you. Can you tell us your name and spell your first and last name?
Kelly Wood, Kellywwood.
And where do you work, ma'am?
Orange County Sheriff's Office.
And what do you do for them?
I'm a crime scene investigator,
How long have you been a crime scene investigator?
going on 17 years.
And what sort of education and training and experience did you have to start your career as a crime scene investigator? And then we'll talk about what, if anything, you've done since you started.
I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Sociology and Criminal Justice, and then got hired actually by the Sheriff's Office as a 911 operator first, and then I came over to crime scene.
And what sort of training did they provide you to transition into being a crime scene investigator?
My training initially consisted of 12 weeks of field training, and then since then I've received almost 1,000 hours of continuing education.
And approximately, as of 2009, September 2009, how many crime scenes do you think you'd been out to by that point?
Hundreds. I really can't give you a number. It was probably hundreds.
How about homicide scenes?
Let's see. Probably 15 to 20.
All right, now how is it that somebody such as yourself, as a crime scene investigator, gets called out to a scene?
I was the only person working the night shift that day.
So it was just your time.
It was my day, yep.
All right, and so how is it that you get notified to come out to a scene?
At that point in time, I think we still had pagers, and I got a page to call our comm center, and
Okay.
they're the ones who give notification.
And once you got paged, did you call somebody?
I don't remember at that point if I did or if I didn't or if I just responded.
All right, and so you get out to where? Where are you going?
I went out to a scene in Islesworth.
All right, and when you got there, were there members of your office there?
From the sheriff's office, not from crime scene, but there were other officers there.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Did you get any sort of briefing as to what you would be walking into without telling us what it is if you did?
Very briefly, yes.
And who is it that you spoke to?
Initially, it was Detective Gerald White.
All right. Now, this will be a yes or no question. Did he relay to you the contents of a 911 call that was made?
Yes.
Okay. Based on that understanding, did you investigate this crime as a domestic crime between two people that lived in that house, or a stranger, like as if I had gone into this house in Islesworth?
It was initially investigated as a domestic disturbance.
Okay. Now, after receiving your briefing, were you working alone? You did say you were alone, but I didn't know if somebody else came out there with you at that time.
Not at that time, several hours later.
All right. And about what time did you get to the scene, if you recall?
It was about 9:40 or so in the evening.
And were you working at the sheriff's office, or were you doing other things with your life and then got called out?
I actually was on a different scene and left directly from that scene to go there.
Okay. And what did you do after you got briefed?
Actually, Detective White requested that I leave the scene and go directly to the sheriff's office.
And by the sheriff's office, are we talking about John Young and State Road 50?
Yes.
And how long did it take you to do that?
It took me about 20 minutes to get there.
All right, and then when you got there, what did you do?
I went up to our second floor interview rooms.
All right, and who was hanging around the interview rooms?
Detective Brian Cross was there, if I recall, and Detective Sue Hempfield, I believe.
All right, and was there a suspect there?
Yes.
And do you see that person in the courtroom today?
Yes.
All right. And were you asked to do anything, or just did you come to hang out?
No, I was there for a specific reason,
All right, and what was that to do?
to collect a gunshot residue kit.
All right. What is a gunshot residue kit?
Basically, it is very small, for lack of better term, sticky tabs, and there's one for each hand, a little vial, and you put the tab on each hand. It's labeled left and right, and I actually brought one if you wanted me to show the jury what they look like.
May I borrow it and show it to the defense?
Just so you know, it is a training one, so it has been opened and used. not used, but for demonstration purposes.
Okay.
It's been opened.
All right, so here's a question about this demonstrative training kit. Is that similar to what you were using back in 2009?
Yes.
Okay. Do you guys, and by you guys, I mean law enforcement in the Orange County Sheriff's Office, do you collect GSR kits anymore?
It's very rare. It's mostly used at this point for investigative.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled. I'll allow this. Go ahead.
So if I was to narrow that down to a yes or no, it's not often.
Not often.
Okay. All right. And the instructions that you were talking about, does that come on the kit or is that something, well, I'll leave the question at that. Does it come on the kit?
There's an instruction sheet that comes inside the kit, yes.
Okay. And can the witness stand down with the demonstrative kit?
As long as you give her a microphone so that everyone can hear her.
I'm going to do that.
You can use the handheld one.
I'll hold it for her.
There you go.
Yeah.
If you need to move, Mr. Gillen, so that you can observe this, feel free
I'm
to
fine,
do
Your Honor, thank you.
We're good. All right. What are we looking at?
This is what our kit looks. It just says gunshot residue evidence collection kit, and you can see it's well used. We just use it for training. And on the inside is instructions and also an information sheet that, according to our laboratories, helps them. It gives them information as to the suspect and the victim information, case information, that type of information. And
Let's
also,
turn to the specific instructions about how to do it and where to put it and whatnot.
it's actually very simple. There's a picture on the instruction sheet as to where they suggest that you take the gunshot residue test from on each hand.
And where would that be if you put it in words for the record that's in words?
On the top of the hand and also on the palm.
Okay. All right. And how many of these sticky stamp things do you get per hand?
One per hand.
So there isn't a separate one for the webbing of the thumb and forefinger in the top of the hand?
That's correct. Just one for each hand.
All right. And is there anything else to demonstrate while we're up?
I have the vials and that's it.
Do you have the actual sticky thing? Can you show them that?
They're individually labeled right hand and left hand. And you would open the top. And because this one says the left hand, you just do this. It's very simple. You just dab firmly on the hand, focusing primarily on the index and the thumb because that is what is typically used for the trigger pull.
Does it say how many times to stamp the person?
It does not.
Okay.
And then flip over your hand, and then you do the back side or the palm.
And then when you're done, what do you do?
Then when you're done, put it back into the envelope or back into the vial and into the envelope, and then you do the same thing with the opposite hand.
Okay. You can pack up and go back to your seat.
Okay.
All right. So, did you do what you just did to my left hand to Mr. Ward's hands?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
What I'm showing you is what has been marked for identification purposes as states N as in Nancy. Can you tell me whether or not you recognize N?
I do.
And how do you recognize it?
It has our Orange County Sheriff's Office evidence tape on it, and it has my initials on it.
And when you packaged it, did you label it?
Yes.
And does that have the case number and some other identifying information?
Yes, it does.
And then did you tape it up?
Yes.
Did you put initials on it?
Yes.
And then other than FDLE tape, is it in substantially the same condition as you when you last saw it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move N for identification into evidence.
Any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, this will be received without objection, State's Exhibit Number 11.
Do you recall about what time you did that?
If I could refer to my report, I have the exact time written down.
If you would, refer to yourself. Don't read anything out loud, and let us know if that refreshes your memory.
Yes, it does.
What time did you collect the gunshot residue with that sticky stamp from Mr. Ward's hands?
At about 10:54 in the evening.
And are you privy to knowing when the 911 call was said to have come in?
No, I don't know.
All right. What else, if anything, did you do at the sheriff's office at that point in time?
I took one identification photograph of Mr. Ward, and that was it.
Okay, and we will turn to that. What did you do after you were done at the sheriff's office?
I returned back to the scene.
And about what time did you return to the scene?
It was about 10:20 or so.
And
I'm sorry. 11:20. My apologies.
not a problem. So about 20 minutes?
Yes.
All right. Now, did the sheriff's office get a search warrant before performing a search of this house?
Yes.
About what time were you all able to execute the search warrant on this house?
I believe Gerald White returned with the search warrant at approximately 1:45 in the morning, and Detective Brian Cross served the warrant on the residence at 1:47.
So this is back before this nice process of electronic search warrants, email. Okay. So what were you doing between 11:20 and 1:45 in the morning?
I sat in my van.
Paid at least?
Yes.
All right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume the first thing you do is you go in and document the crime scene, or walk through and then do that.
By document, we do it with photography. Yes.
All right. What I'm going to be showing you is some digital photographs on an item labeled AM as in Mary for identification. Is that up on your screen, Ms. Wood?
No. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Something is happening. Okay, yes.
Do you recognize the first image on this disc, AM, image number 607?
Yes, I do.
And is that some sort of information you put on it just to remind yourself as to what case number these images belong to once it goes to the photo lab?
That's actually the deputy's steno pad, and I just took a photo of it because it had the case information on it.
Do you recognize image 610 on that?
I do.
613?
Yes.
And your camera system seems to go by threes. Do you understand why?
I don't know.
Neither do I. Okay. I'm going to show you the last one. It ends in 907.
No.
904. Do you recognize these images?
Yes. Yes, I do recognize that one.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move AM for identification into evidence.
Any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
This will be received as State's Exhibit Number 12 without objection.
Permission to publish.
Granted. Hold on, because it hasn't come up yet. All right, now, go ahead.
Okay, talking about image 607, is that the case information that was on the deputy's little notepad?
Correct.
610, you had mentioned a single photograph of Mr. Ward at the time of the GSR collection. Is that what that is?
Yes.
613, what is that?
That is the driveway leading up to the front of the residence.
616,
That is also the driveway with a cell phone.
619.
Same cell phone, just a more up-close photograph.
Now, did you ultimately have anything to do with the collection of this item?
I did. I photographed it, as you can see, and I collected it.
May I approach with X for identification?
You may.
Showing you X for identification, can you tell me if you know or recognize that? You can look at the contents, just don't show the jury.
Okay. Yes.
What do you recognize X as?
It is the same cell phone that appears in the photograph.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move X for identification into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
This will be received without objection as State's Exhibit Number 13.
All right, just to sidetrack from the photos for a minute, what did you do with X or 13 after you collected it?
After I collected it, I transferred it over to Detective Gerald White.
At his request?
Yes.
All right. And then when's the next time you had something to do with that cell phone, if ever?
Never.
All right. Did you process that cell phone for latent fingerprints?
No.
Why not?
I never saw it again.
All right. So you didn't process it for anything else because that was your end of the relationship?
Correct.
Okay. (622), is that another image of that device?
Yes.
625,
It's an identification photo of the address.
that's in Orange County, Florida.
Yes.
628,
That is the front door of the residence.
and when you came out there earlier around, well, whenever it is you got there before going to the sheriff's office, was the window like that, or did you not have an opportunity to observe it?
I did not have an opportunity to observe it.
Did you see anybody from your office make entry when the search warrant was executed?
Just Detective Brian Cross and I were together when it was executed, and it was like that when I saw it.
Okay. 631,
A close-up version of the same photograph, the front doors.
who's this handsome gentleman in 634?
That is Detective Brian Cross executing the search warrant.
637,
And that's a photograph of the search warrant.
Now, it seems silly, but do you read the search warrant even if nobody's there?
Yes, they do.
640?
That is upon opening the front doors of the home, and that's the front entryway.
And is that the lighting in the house as you first observed it when you came in?
Yes,
And is that bright light kind of off-center left, is that the flash of your photography, or was that an artificial light in the house?
no, that's my flash.
643?
That is directly right when you come into the home, and the staircase leading to the second floor.
Are there more than one staircase?
I don't remember.
Okay. But this is an image of a staircase.
Yes,
Now, I see some artificial lighting on the first floor. Do you agree with that? There's that light shining down?
yes.
How would you describe the lighting before your flash bulb went off in this image inside
It's
the
dim.
house?
It's dim.
Okay.
That's the same staircase, just.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
I got to say what it is. Image 646. Go ahead.
Sorry. That's the same staircase, just with me going up the stairs, taking photos as I go.
And again, you have a flash going off.
Yes,
Is it still dim in this area of the house without your flash, or is it different?
it is still dim.
649?
It's the same staircase looking up.
652?
That's the same staircase. I'm now on kind of a very short little landing looking up.
And is the illumination there from your flash, or is there more illumination on the second floor that we can't see in this image?
No, it's mostly from my flash.
655?
That is the landing at the top of the staircase, looking.
And facing which direction from the top of the staircase? If you know.
Up I'm envisioning it if you go up, turning left off the staircase, looking down the hallway.
What is 658?
A walk-in closet,
661?
walk-in closet.
And was this walk-in closet, did it have any relationship to any of the bedrooms?
It was within the vicinity of the master bedroom.
664?
That is the master bedroom, and that was from walking through the door of the bedroom, looking to the left.
667?
What I'm doing here is panning from left to right with my photographs, and so this is another picture of the master bedroom.
670?
Again, the master bedroom.
And geographically, which direction are we facing? If you remember.
I don't remember. I think I might have it written in my report, but I don't remember geographically which direction.
If you would, refer to your report without telling us out loud, and tell us if that refreshes your memory.
Yes, sir. Yes, that does refresh my memory.
All right, geographically, which way would one be facing in this image?
The back of the wall where the headboard is would be south.
And is that Mrs. Ward that we see in the bottom right of the image?
It is.
Now, looking at 673, what are we looking at here?
That is the victim, Mrs. Ward.
676.
That is blood spatter.
And correct me if I'm wrong, now is this kind of westerly if the headboard is south?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
688, is that another image of Mrs. Ward as you found her?
Yes.
694, what is this?
This is Miss Ward's foot and also blood drops on the carpet.
And if the image were to be lifted up upright geographically, or what are we facing?
You would still be, if you stood directly upright, you would still be facing the south because she was against the west wall.
So we, like that first image in the bedroom, we're facing the headboard and the nightstand?
Correct.
Okay. Image 697,
Is blood drops on the carpet.
and is there anything noticeable on any of the bedding as well?
On the bed skirt, there is some blood drops there, and on the very top portion, it's a little out of focus because that's not what I was focusing on, but there are some stains on the white comforter.
Image 700, what are you taking an image of here?
That is the bed in the master bedroom, and that's the right side of the bed, which would be, I guess, the west side. And there's some, kind of near the center, some purple stains.
Is that what you're referring to now that I've zoomed in the image?
Yes.
And is there anything on the pillow in this image as I've refocused it?
It's hard to see, but there is something on the pillow, and it was difficult to tell what it was.
Did you suspect it was blood?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustain. Rephrase.
If I could know if it goes to foundation or the particular objection, I could fix it.
Basis of
Objection
foundation.
is speculation. She's speculating.
Just rephrase the question.
I'll lay some foundation. In the number of crime scenes that you had been to prior to this one, we discussed that earlier.
Yes.
Had you ever been exposed to suspected blood?
Yes.
And with you, do you carry chemical kits to presumptively test things for blood?
Yes, we do.
And do you often, before this instance in 2009, would you send things to the lab that you suspected were blood? You did a presumptive chemical test for blood. Would the laboratory confirm your suspicions?
Yes.
Approximately how many times do you think that might have occurred prior to investigating this scene in September of 2009?
100.
Okay. And as we have seen in previous images on this exhibit, was there apparent blood on and around Mrs. Ward on the floor?
Yes.
In your opinion, did you have an opinion as to whether or not this stain we're talking about in 700 was blood?
It did not.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
And it calls for yes or no at this point. Did you have an opinion about whether this particular stain appeared to be blood?
I did have an opinion
And what was your opinion?
that it was not.
Objection, Your Honor, to her
Ooh.
opinion.
Overruled.
So did you ultimately end up swabbing it with a saline thing and then doing a presumptive test?
No, I didn't.
Image 703. What are we looking at?
Suspected blood spatter on the comforter.
Image 706. What are we looking at?
That is a nightstand that was found, that could be found to the right or geographically the west of the bed.
So if we're entering the bedroom, right of the headboard or left of the headboard?
Right.
And when you entered the room, was that drawer open or closed?
It was closed.
All right. And when you opened this drawer, let's talk about what you are wearing as you're processing this scene. Are you wearing anything on your hands?
Yes.
What are you wearing?
Gloves.
And what else, if anything, are you doing to protect yourself from contaminating the scene?
At this point, because I knew that the scene was going to be transferred to another crime scene investigator, I was just doing the initial documentation, so I was only wearing gloves.
Okay. And what is on the nightstand next to the black object that says IBM ThinkPad?
It is a black gun holster.
And was that there when you got into the room, or is that something you put there?
That was there when I got there.
All right. So other than you opening the drawer, this image reflects what you found.
Yes.
Now, when you found that object in the center of this image, did you do anything with it?
I photographed it, as you can see, and then I picked it up with gloved hands, photographed it, and used a red Sharpie marker on the cylinder so that it was obvious when it was opened which casing or bullet was under the firing pin at the time.
May I approach the witness with P for identification?
You may.
Do you recognize P for identification? The object on top of the two envelopes?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it as?
It is the weapon that is seen in the photograph, and I believe it's a .357 Magnum.
And is there a red mark on one of the cylinders?
Yes,
Did you put that mark there?
I did.
Image 709.
It's the same general vicinity. It's the nightstand, and it's more focusing on the fact that there was the gun holster there.
$712.
That is the revolver that was in the nightstand.
$715.
That is ammunition that was also in the nightstand drawer.
And what is your familiarity, if any, with firearms and ammunition?
Just what I've learned from being a crime scene investigator, it is not extensive.
Okay. Are you familiar with ammunition such as what appears to be labeled as 410 gauge on this box?
Yes,
Are you able to answer the question whether you could use 410 gauge ammunition with the firearm that is in this drawer?
no, no, you cannot.
718.
That is still the master bedroom, and that is the bed, and on the left side, what I was showing is the black laptop that's on the left side of the bed.
721.
Same image with the laptop and some glasses, water, and a coffee mug.
724. In the previous images, the laptop seemed more closed. Did you do anything to this laptop?
Correct. Once I photographed it as it was slightly open. I could see that there was a reflection. I could see kind of the blue Windows screen, so I knew it was on. So I lifted it up and photographed the screensaver there.
727, is that a close-up?
Yes, it is.
$730.
This was just a documentation photo of the room. It's a little small work desk in the master bedroom.
$733.
That's the master bathroom.
And are we looking at the perspective of somebody coming from the master bedroom, or are we looking across into the master bedroom, if you know?
I don't remember.
736.
That's the one of the vanities in the master bathroom.
739.
Master shower area.
742.
Garden tub in the master bath.
745.
More of an overall of that same area with the bath and the vanity.
748.
This is walking out of the master bathroom.
And do you know what room we're facing there in the background?
I do not know.
751?
This was for lack of a better term, like a dressing area or a large, maybe walk-in closet. And there was a little vanity bag with prescription medications in it.
754?
Some kind of a document. It was in the dressing area.
757?
I don't remember what room this was. There were many.
Nothing of relevance in this room?
No.
Okay. I will speed through these images until there's something relevant. Did you document the house?
Yes.
Stopping at 793, what are we looking at here?
This is the kitchen.
And was there anything on the counter here in the center of this image?
There was, I don't know if it was empty or not, but there was an open wine bottle.
$796,
Dining room.
$799,
On the far right side is still the dining room, moving into maybe a formal living room, family room.
$802,
That's the same living room, family room that has glass doors leading into I believe, the back patio.
$805.
That's the same living room, family room.
Was the television on, or did you turn it on?
It was on.
Did you change a channel?
No.
808,
That's the same family room, living room, and that was two double doors leading out to the back porch patio area.
811,
That is the back porch leading from where the living room, family room was.
is it fair to say there's more than one back porch?
Yes.
814,
That is off of that back porch. That is the portion of I believe, the pool deck.
$817,
On the right-hand side, it's the same little patio area from the living room, family room, and that's looking out to the right, and I believe that's more of the pool deck out to the right.
820,
That's the pool and the pool deck.
let's skip ahead a couple. 829, what are we looking at here?
This is another patio area, and there's a grill there.
832,
That's the same patio area with the grill, and below the grill area, there's some discoloration in the grout, it looks like.
835,
Ashtray?
is there anything in the bottom right of this image?
That is, or it appeared to be the bottom of a wine glass, like this, the flat portion where the stem would be attached.
838,
Partially smoked cigar.
841,
Those are purplish, brownish stains and some broken wine glasses. A broken wine glass, at least one.
844,
Looks like it's the bottom portion of that wine glass from the previous picture.
847,
Hard to tell. Sorry. Just the back patio with the mat.
and an 850, where are we?
Back in the kitchen.
853, was that on the counter or did you find that somewhere?
I found that in the black and white purse that was at the previous photograph.
856,
Kitchen sink,
859,
that's under the kitchen sink.
862,
The trash can with an empty bottle in it.
865,
And I moved the empty bottle because there was a bunch of papers, and underneath that was additional empty bottles.
Could you tell what the date of the newspaper was in 862?
Sunday, September 20th.
$868,
Dining room, formal dining room maybe.
$871,
Bar area,
$874,
the same bar area with the cabinet doors open.
$877,
The same bar area with cabinet doors open showing wine glasses.
$880,
Another living room area.
$883,
I believe it's the same living room area as the previous photo.
$886,
Same living room area.
$889,
Another living space.
$892,
This was an office.
$895,
Leading out of the office.
$898,
Another office which was a bit smaller.
$901,
Another bedroom.
$904,
Bedroom.
and $907.
Another bedroom.
Did you move that holster in the master bedroom, or did you leave it?
I believe I left it.
Other than marking the cylinder that had a cartridge casing with the firing pin struck, did you do anything with the ammunition in that gun?
No.
Now, after doing those overall photographs, what else did you do at the scene, if anything?
At approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, I transferred the gunshot residue kit that I had collected earlier to investigator Amanda Vibert, and I departed the scene.
I apologize, I couldn't hear that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, I transferred the gunshot residue kit that I had collected earlier to CSI Amanda Vibert, and about 3:12, I left the scene.
Now, at a later date, did you go and collect what's called buccal swabs or buccal swabs from Mr. Ward?
Yes, I did.
May I approach with E for identification?
You may.
Let me know if you can recognize E for identification without opening it. But if you need to, we can help you.
Let's see it. Yes, I recognize it.
What do you recognize E as?
It's an envelope that I placed the 2 boxes containing buccal swabs in.
All right, so now let's back up. What is a buccal swab?
Buccal is basically the inside of your cheek. and there's sterile swabs that we rub on the inside of the cheeks, and it collects your DNA.
And how long do you have to rub to get the DNA?
Not long at all.
And forgive me if you just described it. It's a long, hard Q-tip, basically.
Yes, I brought some with me if you would like me
Okay.
to show them.
Can I show the defense attorneys first? Thank you. May the witness stand down again, Judge?
She may.
So if you would, could you show us the contents of this demonstration bag?
Yes. These are the swab boxes that we place the swabs in, and these are the swabs inside of these containers.
And can we open those? And then can you show me how you package it?
Yes.
Okay? Just don't do it to me.
Okay. So these are the Q-tips, and you just ask the subject to open their mouth, and you swab the inside of their cheek area. And then they're placed in these boxes so that they can air dry, and then placed into envelopes.
And is this box designed, and can you show them how the Q-tip doesn't touch the sides of the other?
They kind of are suspended like this so that they can dry and do not touch each other.
And I saw that there was gloves in that envelope. Do you wear gloves to do that?
Yes,
Is that because you don't want your DNA on it?
yes.
Okay.
And I don't want their mouths touching my hands, so.
I was getting to that. All right. You can retake your seat. So after you collected those from Mr. Ward, you packaged them up and labeled the envelope and so on and so forth,
Correct.
and turned it over to either the head CSI, Ms. Vibert, or evidence.
Yes,
All right. Now, at a later point in time, did you come out to FDLE, I believe, to collect some gunshot residue from Agent Yesenia Barron?
correct.
Your Honor, objection relevance.
I can approach.
Specifically, to show that there was no debris. And then we walked into their firing range, and she kind of walked in doctor style with her hands up so she didn't touch anything. And at that point, I photographed the weapon that was going to be used.
Was that the same weapon that we were talking about in box P?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And also 2 live rounds that were also collected from the weapon. And I took a gunshot residue test from the agent prior to her firing the weapon. And then she fired the weapon, and I photographed her hands after doing so. And then we walked back out into the hallway, and I took a second gunshot residue kit test from her.
Okay. And so obviously you were able to do that second test much sooner after the firing of the weapon than Mr. Ward had his test done.
Correct.
Okay. And if Mrs. Ward didn't have her gunshot residue testing done until her autopsy, then obviously that would have been much longer in time than what we are talking about here.
Correct.
Okay. May I approach with Y and Z?
You may.
Can you tell me if you recognize Y and Z for identification?
Yes, I do.
All right, let's start with Y. Why not? What do you recognize Y as?
Y is the gunshot residue test that I took after she washed her hand and prior to firing.
And how about Z?
Z is the gunshot residue test I took after firing.
And did you do that in a manner like you demonstrated on me?
That's correct.
And did you package it and label it as we've described for previous exhibits?
Yes.
And seal it?
Yes.
And then provide it to Amanda Vibert or to the evidence?
Actually, I was already at FDLE and I submitted it directly to them.
So direct delivery.
Correct.
So other than the FDLE evidence tape on these items, is it in substantially the same condition as when you turned it over to FDLE?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time the state would move Y and Z into evidence.
Any objection?
Same objection, Your Honor.
All right, over objection, these are admitted. Y is admitted as State's Exhibit number 14. Z is admitted as State's Exhibit 15.
State would move E for identification into evidence.
No objection.
Any objection? All right, this will be received into evidence as State's Exhibit number 16 without objection.
Now again, you left that scene at the house in Islesworth before any processing began other than you just marking the firearm which chamber had been fired?
Correct.
All right. No other questions?
Cross.
Your Honor, we're going to probably need to get States 12 so we can take some of those photos off there.
Go ahead.
That we can, I'll ask Mr. Ellsworth to try to handle that.
I'm happy to help if you
That'd
prefer.
be great.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry, Sean. Good afternoon.
Hello.
I don't believe we've met. My name is Craig Gillen. And
Hello.
I represent Mr. Ward.
Yes.
I have a few questions. Now, you indicated that you arrived at 9:40 that evening, correct?
Yes.
Now, were you on duty there at 9:40?
Yes.
And when you say on duty, where were you physically located?
Actually, I had left another, a natural death and went directly to this.
Okay. So how many people in the Sheriff's Department have training in GSR and taking the GSR samples?
Everybody in my unit is trained to collect it.
So you weren't the only person working your unit that night, correct?
Yes, I was.
You were the only person working.
Yes.
Now, at 9:40, Mr. Ward was at the Sheriff's office, correct?
I don't know where he was. I went to the scene and he was not there. I don't know where he was.
Well, did anyone tell you that he was back? He had been back in the Sheriff's office since picked up about 8 o'clock?
I didn't know he'd been there since 8 o'clock, no.
So no one told you that he would have been at the Sheriff's office had you wished to do a GSR on him at 8 o'clock?
No, I did not know that.
Okay. But the GSR you did do did not take place until you said, was it a little after 11?
No, that's when I got back to the residence. I believe it was about 10:54 or 9:54. I would have to refer to my report. I can tell you what time it was if I looked at my
So,
report.
just so we can get the framework before we get into the questions here, what happened is you get called and then you report to the scene there, the home, at 9:40, correct?
Yes,
You were then called away from the scene back to the sheriff's office to conduct GSR on Mr. Ward, correct?
that's correct.
Now, you've shown us your photographs of Mr. Ward and explained to us the testing that you did on him, and you explained to us how you did with the various swabs, right?
Yes,
Now, the kit that you showed the jury was a kit that had 2 swabs, correct?
correct.
And 2 swabs would be 1 swab for the left hand and 1 swab for the right hand, correct?
Correct.
Now, there are swab kits that have 4 swabs, correct?
Yes, there are.
And when you have 4 swab kits, what you can do is you can then have a swab on the back of the hand, correct?
Correct.
And then you put that in your sample, and then separately you test on another swab the palm of the hand, correct?
Correct.
That way, when you're doing GSR testing, if you have a swab on the back of the hand, you would be able to find out if GSR, you would know that it was located on the back of the individual's hand, correct?
Correct.
And obviously, if you have GSR testing only on the palm of the hand, then you would be able to say the GSR was located on the palm of the hand, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the same applies to the right hand. So you would be able to do that, and there would be no question about where the GSR particle was found on the hand, correct?
I suppose I don't do any of the testing, so I would assume so, though, yes.
Well, you were trained in taking the swabs, correct?
Correct, but I don't run the samples.
Correct. But you were trained in taking the swabs, correct?
Yes, we switched. We used to use the ones that you're referring to with the 4 tabs, and we were asked by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to change to the 2-tab system.
So you were asked to change so that you could do this. If you had 2 swabs, you could have used 2 kits to find out testing on the back and on the front with 1 kit, correct, on the left hand?
I suppose so.
And you could have done the same on the right hand and tested the back and the front with another kit, correct?
Yes, however, I would think that that would defeat FDLE's purpose in having us switch to the 2-tabbed kit.
Well, but that would, forgetting their purpose, what it would be able to do if that were done was be able to tell a jury whether GSR was found on the back or the palm of the hand, wouldn't it?
Yes,
Okay. But that wasn't done.
that's not how the kit came, so that is not how it was done, correct?
And you didn't use an extra kit in order to kind of make that happen, correct?
No, I did not.
Now, you also testified that when you got to the scene, you saw a black phone, BlackBerry device, correct?
Correct,
And you've identified that, and that's been introduced into evidence, correct?
correct.
Were you informed by any of your colleagues that that had been in the hand of Mr. Ward?
No,
No one told you that?
no,
When you saw the BlackBerry, now, if someone has GSR in their hands, that's something that can also be tested on things that are touched, correct?
I would assume so.
So, I mean, if I have a gun here right now and I shoot it and then I pick up my glasses, then there's a possibility that GSR would be on the glasses if you tested it, correct?
Conceivably, yes.
Yeah. So here we have at the scene the black phone, and I can conclude, may I not, that you did not do any GSR testing on the black phone either that night or ever.
That is correct.
So we don't know whether or not there was any GSR that might have been on the black phone. Is that right?
I do not know that.
Okay. Now, GSR testing, you're kind of counting on the sticky part getting the material, right?
Correct.
And you can't have, when you're doing GSR testing, the most important thing is to try to get, as a timing thing, you want to get it done as quickly as possible after a gun goes off, correct?
Correct.
And you like to do it in a situation where you minimize or eliminate the possibility of any movement of an individual's hands or body, correct?
That's correct.
That way, you would maximize the opportunity to find out whether there was any GSR in the hand of the individual that is undergoing testing, correct?
Correct.
Now, when you arrived at the house at 9:40, did you go inside?
No.
You remained outside, and that's when you were called back to the sheriff's office.
Correct.
And then, so you didn't take any photographs then? You didn't collect any evidence? Did you collect the phone at that time?
No.
You did nothing except show up and then ordered to go back to the sheriff's office.
Correct.
You go back to the sheriff's office and you're directed to conduct a GSR test on Mr. Ward, which you did, correct?
That's correct.
And you filmed or photographed his hands and all that, right?
I took one identification photograph.
Okay, did you take any photographs of his hands?
No.
So is that a common thing that you're supposed to do, to take photographs of someone's hands before the up and down when you do that?
It's not, it can happen. It's not a requirement, but we do typically try to at least do an identification photograph to match the two.
Well, but you didn't take any photographs of his hands before the GSR testing, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay, all right. Now, unlike the situation in the Ward in the Ward home, you told us about a test that you conducted in 2011.
Yes.
And when was the date on 2011?
I believe I said February 2nd,
Okay.
2011.
So about a year and a half after this event, the state decides that they needed to do this test. Is that right?
Objection. Calls for speculation of facts, not in evidence.
I'll rephrase.
Sustain. Rephrase.
I'll rephrase. So about a year and a half after you go out to the Ward's house, you are then directed to go and run and participate in a simulated test with an agent firing the weapon, correct?
Correct.
And did anyone tell you why you were doing that a year and a half after the incident?
Objection. Calls for hearsay.
Sustain.
So you're told to go down there, and you're trying to create the most pristine situation that you can, because you've washed this agent's hands, and I think you said she held her hands up like she was a doctor.
Yes.
So she's walking around like this.
Yes.
And of course, that's not what people do in real life, is it?
I assume not.
Well, because, in the context of your experience in taking GSR, people that generally are in cases that you are involved in don't wash their hands and walk around like this and hold them up like a doctor before a gun goes off.
No.
Isn't that right? And so here we have seconds before the gun goes off, in comes, we'll call it the doctor agent, and she then fires the gun, comes right out seconds after, and GSR testing is done, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Again, the point that we want to raise here is that it's important to have, to find out about the GSR, it's important to have the test done as soon as possible after the gun goes off. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do is, if we could get up on, I believe it's 673. What do I, Mr. J, what do I need to do here to?
Nothing.
Perfect. I like that.
Permission to publish to the jury?
You're asking to publish to the jury? This
Yes.
is in evidence, so yes, go ahead.
Yes, it is.
Hold on.
Hold,
It should be shown up in a second. It's,
just
all
one
right,
moment.
the jury's computers should have come on now.
Well,
They have? Okay. Try it again, Mr. Jones.
Excuse me, I thought 706 is that in evidence? I thought,
You said 673.
oh, no, 673 is, I thought that 673 was in evidence. Correct. Is it in evidence?
Yes.
Yes, I would like this published to jury.
All right.
Now, this is an image, was this photograph taken by you?
Yes,
And so this is after you have gone in, the search warrant, we saw the picture of you taking a photograph of Detective Cross reading the search warrant there, and then in everybody goes, correct?
correct.
Now, so what you're doing is you're going around, and this scene has not, to your knowledge, been altered at all since the incident, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. Now, what happens here is we have Mrs. Ward, who is obviously dead here on the floor, correct?
Yes,
Now, her hands have not been bagged yet, have they?
no,
And so, in order to find out whether any GSR was on Mrs. Ward's hands, that was the perfect time for you to run a GSR test on Mrs. Ward's hands before she was moved and before days passed or a day passed. Isn't that right?
except that we're not allowed to touch the body.
Well, who said you couldn't test the body?
We do not have jurisdiction over the body. That's the medical examiner's jurisdiction.
So you could not have gotten permission or gotten an order or gotten some kind of permission to do your GSR test here on her hands that haven't been moved since the incident.
That would have had to have come from the detective, and that would have had to have happened with the medical examiner investigator present, and they would have made contact with the medical examiner.
Well, you had the detective there at the scene, right?
Yes,
And didn't you have someone from the medical examiner's office there?
not until many, many hours later, and I was already gone.
Well, many, many hours later, someone from your unit could have come back and run a GSR test on Mrs. Ward before she had her hands bagged and before she was moved. Isn't that right?
Mrs. Day, rephrase your question.
I'll rephrase. And so here we have it, just to break it down. We have Mrs. Ward on the floor here, and her hands are not bagged, are they?
They are not.
And so if someone in law enforcement or someone in the medical examiners said, you know, maybe it's a good idea to find out whether she has any GSR in her hands, and now would be the perfect time to do it. You didn't do that, did you?
I'll let her answer it one more time. Go ahead.
You didn't do it, did you?
Didn't conduct a GSR test on her?
That's right.
No, I didn't.
Now, were you there when Mrs. Ward's hands were bagged?
No.
You had left by that time.
Yes.
You had indicated if we could see I believe it's 706. Now, 706, to orient us to the bedroom, there are two night tables in that room, correct?
Yes.
One on this side of the bed, correct?
Correct.
Which is where the gun was inside of that drawer, correct?
Yes,
Closed up.
yes.
And right above there, that black object, what is that?
That's the gun holster.
It's what?
Gun holster?
That's a gun holster.
Yes.
Now, did you run any test on the gun holster?
No,
Do you do any DNA testing?
no,
So you do not do any DNA testing.
I do not, no.
Do you do any fingerprint testing?
Yes,
All right. So here we have, on the night table, we have a holster, and inside we have this gun, correct?
correct.
What, if anything, did you do to see whether or not there were latent prints or prints that could be taken off the night table or the drawer that is now open, but it was closed when you got there?
I did not do any processing at the scene.
So let me get it straight. You did no fingerprint work at all at the scene?
Correct. I photographed the house, documented the fired casing, and that was it. And collected the cell phone, which we've already gone over, outside the house.
Now, you also took some photographs of a laptop. Let me see if Mr. Day would be kind enough, if we could see number 721. Now, this side is a photograph of the other side of the bed from where Mrs. Ward was, correct?
Correct.
And she was on the floor on the other side of the other side of the bed, correct?
Yes.
Now, what we have here is we have a situation where there appears to be a computer that was in the comforter is kind of pulled back there, right?
Yes.
And the computer was on the bed, right?
Yes.
And when you found it, it was kind of tilted open where it was still had a glow on the screen, correct?
It is how I found it in that photo.
Okay. And that was, and the name on that computer was Diane Ward, correct?
I could not see that until I fully opened the laptop.
Well, when you fully opened the laptop and you looked at it, it was Diane Ward's.
Yes.
It said Diane Ward, correct? Okay. Did you do any other processing of that while you were there?
No.
You indicated that when you went out and you ultimately picked up the phone, right?
Prior to entering the house, yes.
Prior to entering the house, you picked up the phone or the BlackBerry that you have identified and has been introduced into evidence, correct?
Yes.
Now, what you did then, because that was a piece of evidence, that was a piece of evidence that you collected, right?
Yes.
And when you collect a piece of evidence, what you do is you fill out a property form, correct?
Yes.
And when you fill out a property form, that means that the piece of evidence is going into the custody of the sheriff's office as a piece of evidence in their evidence area, correct?
Could be, or transferred to somebody else, but yes.
Okay. It's a piece of evidence, and you filled out a property form, and therefore it was in the custody of the sheriff's office as evidence and property, correct?
Yes.
Now, can you figure out, you okay?
Yeah.
Do you need water?
No, fine, thank you.
Okay. Did you know at any time whether or not anything happened to that phone other than it remaining in the evidence property?
I transferred it that evening to Detective Gerald White. He signed for it on the back of on the back of the property form.
Did you go into the bathroom there, you took photos of every room in the house, didn't you?
I did.
And so you took photos of the master bedroom, correct?
Yes.
Did you go and look in the sink to see whether or not the sink was had any water in the sink?
No, I just took general photographs.
Did you go test the towel to see if there was a towel that was wet or anything?
No, I didn't touch anything in the bathroom.
Didn't find anything that was wet or in the sink or on a towel, did you?
I was not searching. No, I was photographing only.
But you didn't see anything or hear anybody finding anything like that, did you?
No.
Now, the wine bottles that you found, I guess we had, what, 2 or 3 wine bottles in the trash can and one up outside that had been open, is that right?
I think in both of the trash cans combined, I think there was 3, and then there was one on the counter.
Okay.
I don't remember one outside. There was the broken wine glass outside.
No, when I mean outside of the trash can.
Oh, yes.
So you had one that was on the counter.
Yes.
That was partially, that had been, that about 3/4 of it had been consumed apparently.
It looked like it, yes.
And then empty, how many empties in the trash can?
2 in one and 1 in the other. So 3 total.
Okay. And that was, you zoomed in there on the trash can and we saw, it looks like a Sunday edition of the New York Times, right?
Yes.
And that was the September the 20th New York Times, correct?
Yes.
And right next to that, or on top of that, that's where these empty, or some of these empty wine bottles were, correct?
Yes.
If I may just consult with my colleagues to see whether or not they're. That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Redirect.
All right, I believe you testified earlier. Whose property is the deceased? Is that anybody's property once the body is deceased?
The body becomes the evidence, I guess you could call it, of the medical examiner's office.
So on any homicide scene, natural death scene, do you, as the member of the Orange County Sheriff's Office crime scene investigator team, do you touch the body?
No.
Do you touch the immediate belongings on the body?
No.
Okay. Did you have any question in your mind whether or not Mrs. Ward was present when she was shot?
No.
And I believe you testified earlier you were briefed on the contents of the 911 call that brought you there.
Yes.
So were you investigating this as a whodunit or not?
I was not investigating it as a whodunit.
Now, with your photographs, we've only shown a couple of Mrs. Ward. So remind me if you remember, did you take any photographs or examine her hands more closely?
There are a few.
That calls for yes or no first.
Yes.
All right, now let me break down my bad question. Yes, you took photos, or yes, you examined them?
Yes, I took photos.
Okay. Now, if there were anything on her hands, if you were allowed to touch her hands, would the GSR stamping, as you demonstrated with me, possibly destroy, contaminate, move any evidence that were on her hands?
Yes.
Including blood?
Correct.
including blood spatter, which can be of a diameter less than a millimeter.
That's correct.
No other questions?
May this witness be excused.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You're
Thank
free to go. All right, it is 12 minutes to 5. Do you have a 12-minute witness?
Yes, we do.
All right, call your next witness.
Gerald White.
You may inquire.
Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Greetings. I'm Gerald White. My first name is Jerold. My last name is White, White.
All right. Mr. White, where are you employed?
I'm a deputy sheriff with the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
All right. And how long have you been with the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
I've been a deputy for 19 years and 1 month.
Wow. So you were back in 2009. What unit were you assigned to?
In 2009, I was in the homicide squad of the Criminal Investigation Division.
And were you called upon to assist in the investigation of a homicide that occurred in Islesworth back on September 21st, 2009?
I was.
No, you were not the lead detective.
I was not.
Now, were you asked to author a search warrant for electronic devices?
I was.
All right, and did you obtain that search warrant?
I did.
Now I'm going to approach what's been already entered into evidence of States 13. Do you recognize States 13?
I do.
Was this BlackBerry in States 13, was this located on the driveway of the residence?
It was.
And did you direct crime scene investigators to collect that item?
I did.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross.
No questions, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy. You're free to go.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you have any other witnesses this afternoon? All right. We don't have any witnesses we can reasonably conclude by 5 o'clock, so we're going to quit 10 minutes early today. Same admonition you're going to get every night. Do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't watch the news. Don't talk about it with anyone. Find something else to do with your evening that does not involve this trial. Have a wonderful evening. I will see you back here tomorrow. Please report to the jury room by 8:45. We'll start trial again at 9 o'clock. Deputies will pick you up in the jury room. Leave your notepads on your chairs, please. Thanks.